Hello everyone, this is Rona Palmer from eMaint Enterprises, and thanks for joining us today for this month's Best Practices webinar. And I'm pretty excited to have back with me Joel Levitt, who's the president of Springfield Resources, who's going to be presenting today's topic, Explaining and Selling Proactive Maintenance to Management. In a little background on Joel Levitt. He is a maintenance educator who's trained more than 15,000 maintenance leaders at over 3,000 organizations in 20 countries around the globe. And he's also president since 1980 of Springfield Resources, a management consulting firm that's developed solutions for clients for a host of maintenance issues. And Joel also is a frequent speaker at conferences and has written 10 books and published dozens of articles. And Joel has been kind enough to have a copy of his book that he will personally sign, and one of our attendees will be selected to receive a copy of the book, The Handbook of Maintenance Management, the second edition. And Joel, while people are logging in today, can you maybe just tell our audience a little bit about what prompted you to write the handbook and the second edition, and select the topic that you pulled from the book to talk about today?
Yeah, the book that I wanted to talk about is the second edition of the PM book called The Complete Guide to Preventive and Predictive Maintenance. And I wrote the original version about 10 years ago, and as I reread it, I realized not only had the technology changed, but my opinion about how to manifest preventive maintenance has changed dramatically. So I started doing just a little rewrite, and it turned into probably 50% of the book has completely changed. And it really reflects my current thinking on these issues. So and proactive maintenance is the core concept of that work.
Well, excellent. Well, you know, based on the number of people that have registered for the conference, this must be a pain point for some people and who might be passionate about proactive maintenance but maybe have some challenges selling it internally.
Thanks very much, Ron. I hope everybody's doing well. We have a muggy, hot day outside Pennsylvania, outside Philadelphia. So proactive maintenance is what we're going to be talking about today. I call it PRM. You know, there's PDM is predictive maintenance, PM, preventive maintenance, and PRM is proactive maintenance. But I have to apologize at the beginning, because I'm actually making up this particular usage. I'm using it in a way that I'm using it, and it may be different from the way other people use it. But I like the phrase, and I wanted to use it for that. So this is any activity that's designed to eliminate, reduce, automate, or simplify maintenance. And you may have seen it under, you know, maintenance elimination, maintenance prevention, maintenance improvement, and some maintenance engineering, even some RCM, PM optimization are all going to be part of this proactive maintenance thing. And as far as I'm concerned, it's the most fun part of maintenance. If you want to get maintenance people really motivated, you know, let them solve some long-standing problems. Just to give you an example, we have an ID fan, pretty big one, and it is a major pain of climbing to get to the grease fittings. You know, there was a lot of failures of this fan, and probably maintenance was skipped. In other words, the fan was not lubricated correctly or as frequently as designed. Now, the PRM solution is very simple. Either we pipe the fittings to a block where we can get to it, In the picture you can see you could pipe it either direction and go to a place where you just, put your grease gun on and shoot it and you're done with it. Or another way would be to install automated greasing systems. Neither of these are particularly complicated or hard to see, but when you have a situation where the fan is hard to maintain, anything that simplifies the maintenance is going to be PRM, and it's going to give you like an enormous return on investment. Because just imagine the few $100 cost to pipe this thing and the tremendous amount of return from not having it fail is enormous. Just to be more formal about it, any activity that eliminates maintenance, and I don't mean just not doing maintenance, I mean eliminating the need for maintenance. I mean, when I interview or talk to bosses, big bosses, top managers, they want to make products and they prefer not having maintenance. We all feel that if we have a car, an automobile, we would prefer to drive it and not have maintenance. So any activity that eliminates the maintenance, any activity that reduces the need for maintenance. So if we can manage the wear better, manage contamination better, the need for maintenance will drop away. An activity that reduces the frequency of maintenance. If we have a monthly event, wouldn't it be great if we could honestly make it a quarterly event without compromising reliability or safety? Simplifying maintenance. I was at a school district, and that school districts are not known for being on the cutting edge of maintenance technology. And this district, what they did was so simple. They took every filter on every air handler in the system over a period of time, and they replaced all the screws with one size screw head. Now, that may sound, like, why would they bother doing that? But it dramatically simplified the job of person changing the filters because they always carried the screw gun with that screw head. Also, any activity that speeds up maintenance. If you can figure out how to do it faster, that's a good thing. And big time, all this without compromising your reliability, your safety, your environmental integrity, without compromising any of that stuff. This is not just cost cutting like, cut by 10%. This is not that. This is, going in and looking at what the waste is and what we can do about it. Now, I want to just give you an example from preventive maintenance. You can see here the task lists. There's a bunch of tasks on it that tell you to do all kinds of things. One of the tasks might say to inspect the bearing. And it could be vibration inspection. It could be putting your hand on the bearing. In the old days, it could be putting a screwdriver on the bearing and then putting your ear up to the end of the screwdriver, the blunt end. Whatever the process of inspection doesn't matter for this. Now, we do the inspection every month, and one of the months we see something wrong with the bearing. I mean, the bearing is chattering, the bearing is running hot, and what we're supposed to do is write up a corrective work order or a follow-up work order, and that tells us to remove and replace the bearing and return the asset to like new or good condition. And then like the month later we do the PM test list again. So all of you should be familiar with that way of doing it. That's the tradition. That's, I don't know if it's 100 years old or 1,000 years old, but it's It's the way PM was always designed. I want to show you what it looks like if we were running our PM from the point of view of proactive maintenance. The first three blue boxes are exactly the same as the other model. We remove and replace the bearing, but now we do some other things, and this is where we go out of the maintenance wrench turning and go towards the maintenance as an information worker thing. And we say, you know, if it's worth it, let's analyze why the bearing failed. We can use RCA, which is root cause analysis, or 5 whys, or something more or less formal, depending on usually the costs involved and that level of hazard involved. Now, again, if it's worth it, find some product, process, or procedure to increase the life of the bearing. You know, it could be that your bearings are failing because the folks don't know exactly how to mount them. So they're putting them on the shaft and they're whacking it and they're getting them out of alignment, and you know, nobody told them to chill the shaft or whatever it is. Is there a product that would be maybe a new type of bearing or a new type of grease, a process or procedure to increase the life? And then we run experiments and find out if the solution actually worked. This is the most difficult part, is because we have to validly, if that's a word, we have to make sure that what we say, you know, is the results, like that lubricant actually made the difference. And then we want to send it around, like we want to start to use this widely. If the solution pans out, modify that task list to reduce the frequency, depth, what I mean the amount of disassembly, or even eliminate the task if it turns out to be so reliable. You know, a good example of this is in the airplane business. The 777, the new Boeing, not the newest, but the new Boeing airplane, they no longer take the engines off and service them. They now do a deep inspection in place. So the task list, once they found that they had the reliability to do it that way, they had to modify all the task lists to change the frequencies, depth, and the tasks, even eliminate removing the engine to service it. Now, when I talk about that, there is no manager on the planet that would be against the approach that we solve problems. You know, I don't think you could get a manager to say, no, that's not what that's not something that's interesting to us, because you know, everyone knows that that's the game that we play in order to get great, you know, to really turn, you know, really get to be great at this. So why is it, you know, why is it that it's so hard to get, you know, funding, even small amounts of funding? I ask people in my classes all over the world, you know, do you have like a fund, like a research and development fund? Do you have a fund so that you can, you know, play around with some things? Even worse than that, do you have time to play around with things, or does somebody have time? I'm talking to a group of people right here now. Many of you, it took something to carve out an hour to sit and listen to this. And some of you are still getting interrupted and with different kinds of communications. So what is the chance that you'll be able to take on a project? And then, you know, why is it that the companies are rejecting things that are really, really obviously good ideas? Well, I'm going to say that there's three things, and there may be others, but one is that they feel deeply that it's a waste of money. Like, you doing this or doing that, it's just like they don't really get it about the amount of money that they could be saving. The second one, and probably the more pervasive one, is that they feel that you should be concentrating on the production of whatever you do and not be out there playing around with trying to reduce waste. Because what will happen in their fear is that you'll take your eye off the ball and real production will suffer while you're doing these projects. The third reason is because they don't believe you. A lot of the managers don't feel that maintenance has high credibility. So that's the problem. So these three things. One, what you're promising a return on investment is like blue sky. It's not happening. The second thing is, you lose your attention on the real issue, which is getting the product out the door. And whatever you say is, it's not exactly, your credibility maybe is not so great. So, if you have a high risk and a low credibility, there's no sale. In other words, people are not going to buy whatever it is you're trying to do. If the risk is high, the credibility has to be incredibly high in order to make a sale. And when I say make a sale, I mean make a sale to your management. So what we have to do is we have to play with this curve a little bit and do something where we can change the shape of this thing so that the no sale gets smaller and the sale part gets bigger. So the probability that we'll make a sale, people will, yeah, let's do this. That's what we're looking for. So your actions. You have to lower the manager's perception of the risk of whatever you're doing. So they have a perception of risk. Remember, risk is something that's very, very complicated. You may have somebody that is afraid to fly because because they feel it's dangerous, and yet they smoke, which is 5,000 times more dangerous for a person than flying. So people's perception of risk is very, very strange and is subject to many biases from society, from media. If you think about how often people get attacked by sharks, that's a good example where people will not go in the water because somebody on the other coast got attacked by a shark. The probability of being a meal for a shark is really low. In the world, it's a few a year. But people will not go in the water because of that. And certainly when Jaws came out in the 70s, large numbers of people wouldn't go in the water. The second thing is we want to increase the perception of your credibility. Now, your credibility is dependent on people getting used to the fact that what you say is what happens. That's what credibility is. There's people around you that say, I'll have this finished by the end of the day, that work with you. And you know that they will be finished by the end of the day. Okay? You know that because they have credibility, and if they say it, it happens. Unfortunately, many maintenance departments do not have this kind of credibility. And it makes management reluctant to go with their program because of the credibility issue. And the third thing is that one of the things we have to do is we have to increase the value of what we're proposing to our customers. This is very, very important, that we're giving them something that they value, and it solves a problem that they have. So those are the things that we're going to be talking about today. Now, the first thing we want to do is reduce the perception of risk. And I tell people with proactive maintenance, what you want to do is, once you understand what it is that proactive maintenance is about, you want to start doing projects below the radar, so that by the time you are noticed, you've done 10 projects and 7 of them were successful. So what we want to do is, the perception of risk is, the first project we go in front of management is backed up by, here's 10 things that we've done already, and we know how to do this, and here's the reports from the other ones, and you would pick ones that are kind of what we call low-hanging fruit. In other words, projects which are like no-brainer type projects. Examples are things like, if you don't do an infrared survey annually, go do an infrared survey of your electrical distribution system. You're almost guaranteed, if you haven't done it before, you're almost guaranteed to find some of your circuits are running hot, and you can fix them before something happens. And that's a good catch. You can prove the case. Another thing, is what a lot of people do is, and it's pretty easy, is do a compressed air survey if you have a plant. Because if you haven't done that, I think every hole in your system that adds up to a 1/4 inch diameter is blowing about $4,300 worth of electricity a year, plus it requires more compressor. So there's, it's an easy one. It's easy fix. So we're going to start doing the projects before you talk about the program with management, because everybody wants to be associated with success, and the perception of risk is reduced when people want to be associated with it. But just to, some other examples, some companies that I work with, and all these things are really simple things. These are not the real complicated ones. These are ones you can do in a couple days at the most. One company, looked for and found a new lubricant that extended their drain intervals and reduced their energy use. Actually, energy was a surprise, and the equipment lasted longer. Another company with a pump found a pump seal that was better with the chemicals they were pumping. They were getting whatever life they got out of their old seal, and they experimented with some new ones, and lo and behold, if you get 50% more life, not only do you save money on the seal end, but you save money on the labor end, so you don't have to do as many repairs. One of my favorite little ones is these acoustic grease guns. What happens is they couple, when you put the grease gun on the fitting, you've got a set of headphones, and they couple you acoustically to the bearing, and you can actually hear the grease quiet the bearing. And when the bearing is quiet, it has enough grease. So what this does is it prevents you from over-greasing it, which makes it last longer. it tells you if there's a problem with the bearing, because you put grease in and it won't get quiet, means that there's some problem. So there's these guns cost $1,200, $1,500. So it's amazing how fast you can get a return on investment if you have a lot of hand-greased bearings. One of the easiest things to do is to look at your PMs and cut the unnecessary tasks or back off on the frequencies if you feel that you're doing it unnecessarily too often. Of course, you're going to be looking at your safety aspects. So I'm not saying to cut where there might be a safety exposure, but a lot of PM is strictly for reducing downtime and return on investment. And in that case, you want to be doing as little PM as possible that gets the job done. Another company created a cheat sheet for operations to create great work requests. One of the problems they had was, operations put in work requests, or if it's an SAP shop, they put in notifications that were like wild goose chases because there wasn't enough information there. So the maintenance department, the normal thing to do is to bellyache about that. But what they did was they got together with some of the people in operations and created literally a cheat sheet that showed them, the people filling out the work order, exactly what to put in each field that will make it so that maintenance can give them the best service possible. I mean, that's the issue, is operations, nobody likes to fill out paperwork. But if you fill it out correctly, the chance of you getting what you want in a timely way is dramatically better. This credibility thing it's I think it's a simple idea, but it's sometimes hard to communicate. And here's the practice. Practice doing what you say, no matter what, for say a month, and see if that starts to change people's view of your credibility. When people, this is going to sound strange, but what if people around you got used to the fact that when you spoke, a reality was created, like out of your mouth, out of your thoughts to your speaking, and then reality is created in your speaking? Real simple. What we're saying is, if you say the machine will be back at 3 o'clock, you make damn well sure it's back at 3 o'clock. That's what we're talking about. And there's no excuses. Obviously, if you run into a problem, you'll communicate that and re-promise for another time. But what we're trying to do is, hit our numbers reliably and let people get used to the fact that what you say is what happens. Now, I know this is not easy in maintenance, and the tendency is to pad our estimates. So a little padding may not be a bad thing. But I don't mean like tripling your estimates or anything like that. I mean like really, really paying attention to what you say and then standing behind it. And you're going to find a shift with people. We want to run maintenance with so much integrity that your customers believe you. So, like, before action, think about what impact it'll have on operations. I had a client that it was so great. They had gotten a new device for vibration reading, and they found one of the machines had a bad vibration, and they were sure that a major component was dying. So at the end of the shift, they disassembled the machine, found the problem, and then it took about 16 hours, but they got the machine back up beautifully. And they figured that they saved $5,000 or $6,000 more than the cost of the vibration device. Now, you would think that the management would be really thrilled about this. What happened the next day was, or the day after, they got called into the plant manager's office, and the ops manager or the production manager was looking like his blood pressure was quite a bit higher than normal. And what had happened was, because I'm going to say this is about maintenance, although it could be about operations. What happened was they took the machine out of service, did the 16 hours worth of repair. What they didn't realize was that production had scheduled the first order for a new customer on that machine, and they missed the delivery date because the machine was out of service. Now, so what I'm saying is, before action, think what impact it will have on operations. That was a case where they thought they did a really good thing. Normally it would have been a great thing, but because of this particular situation, they had put in jeopardy, I think it was something like $40 million worth of new business for this plant. So it's kind of crazy that it was all riding on this. Now, do exactly what you say you would do. If you can't communicate immediately with the requester and their boss, if you're not going to be able to do what you said, do complete work. Do not cut corners. Do the right thing. There's the right thing and the expedient thing. And doing the right thing will cause you some grief sometimes, but it's part of this integrity conversation. And always leave your work sites cleaner than when you arrived. Like, this is something you want to communicate to your workers. Like, always, they're cleaner than when you arrive. So there's never a question about that. Now, I want to improve the value of what I'm doing by working on things of vital interest to the manager. So it depends on your business, but the value of something is the utility divided by the cost. And what we're trying to do is increase the utility, the usefulness. For some of you, cost per unit is the big thing. If you make food like French fries, cost per unit, cost per pound. If you refine oil, cost per barrel. So that's really, and then if you're in the trucking business, cost per ton mile. For some people, it doesn't look like that. It looks like reduced downtime and increased plant reliability is the big issue. If you're pumping oil out of the ground or out of the ocean, increasing plant reliability is going to be worth millions of dollars. For some of you, it's the quality of the output. We're looking at processes that, we're trying to get a better quality, more consistent product. Reduce the number, size, and scale of repairs. So, we could have repairs, we have repairs, but we're working to reduce the number, size, and scale of those repairs so they're smaller. Increase your equipment's remaining useful life. In some of your situations, if you're like a college campus or a school district, the equipment that you have, you're going to be with for a long time. You're not getting new equipment. One of the things that's almost universal is that plant managers hate it when they're in the newspapers and it's not about, a United Way campaign or fixing up a park. If it's about a fine or a legal problem, they hate that. We also want to decrease liability, increase safety, and reduce investment by not needing spare standby units. That example was the compressed air. We've seen situations where people cleaned up their compressed air systems and did not need an extra compressor. So you have to listen in a way that may not be familiar. Like, what is management struggling with? Like, what is the challenge that they see? And just some examples, a coal loading pier in Newcastle, Australia. You know, their challenge is to turn ships around faster and have less downtime. At the Mercedes-Benz plant in Vance, Alabama, the drive there is to make Mercedes-Benz this a quality conversation. At Syncrude, they take tar sand and cook it into crude oil. The big thing there is its safety and its reliable output. Nothing happens unscheduled. It's all scheduled. Baseload coal-fired power plant. The thing that they wrestle with is uptime in the summertime, because if they have to replace that power due to an unscheduled outage, it's going to be really expensive. Dimensional lumber plant on the Olympic Peninsula and on the West Coast, we all know what's happened to the housing business. So what they have to do is reduce the costs. They've got to do it less expensively. Major airport, you know, their challenge is to get people in and out with no accidents and with low costs. You know, and the people have a good experience at the airport. And the list goes on and on. But when you're looking at PRM, proactive maintenance, be sure that you mention the things that management is already struggling with in your conversations. That's the key to people's attention, is listen, find out what they're struggling with, and then design your PRM to contribute to them. So to summarize, I don't think PRM costs money. I think it saves money, and you know, you just have to start doing things and measuring what you're doing to really get some benefits out of this. And I think it's very short-sighted to not work in this domain. PRM is a way to keep your eye on the ball, like reducing the waste makes everything work better. You know, the less waste that's there, the easier it is to deal with everything. And the proof of the pudding is in the eating, so make your savings and make sure people know what you're doing after you get through that initial quiet phase. So make sure you're telling people, oh, we did this, we did that, and so management is aware that you're at the leading edge of supporting the objectives that management is talking about. So I want to thank you for your attention and turn this back over to Rona.
Okay, well, thank you, Joel. We appreciate that. So we're going to open up the floor for questions, and please feel free to type your questions in the question box, and any questions that you have for Joel, if you may. And one of the things that I'd like to do before we open up for questions is maybe look at one more poll, if we may, and just say, in your organization, what do you feel would be your greatest barrier to implementing this type of proactive maintenance? Is it that it's going to be considered too risky? Is it that the maintenance team may not have credibility? No one really would perceive the value, or perhaps it's something else. So if we can take a few moments here and tell us what you think the barrier might be. And I'll just ask here. Interesting. Okay, we're getting some. Oh, and Joe, while the one person did ask too, if any of the slides and piece of your presentation would be available later today.
Yeah, I actually put the presentation up at maintenancetraining.com, the articles section. If they just go to articles, they can go down and download the whole presentation.
Okay, great.
You just have to go
All
down the
right.
page, a bit. It's towards the bottom.
On articles. Okay, very good. Okay, well, let's just see what we've gotten there. And so it looks like the lack of value is the biggest deterrent currently. So it sounds like we have some homework to try to demonstrate that and start some experiments, as you said. And secondarily would be something else. And third is the perceived risk. Okay, so thanks for that. One of the questions, Joel, that came through is how to determine when you mentioned that when you're looking at your current PMs and trying to eliminate waste, and what are some of the, how can you determine what is waste? What are some low-hanging fruit that you might look at and what might be good candidates for waste?
The way to do this is to gather your breakdowns, like run reports of the breakdowns on an asset, and then get together all the PM activity on that asset and make sure each task is pointing to something that breaks. Each task has a failure mode associated with it. And if you can't find the failure mode, talk to people and see if there's failure modes that you just don't understand or don't know about. But most PMs, the PM tends to get included on the task list and never gets removed, ever. So you may have things on the task list that for parts of the asset that are gone. So that's the thing I would look at, is make sure what the guys do is actually what's on the task list. But sometimes they don't actually do what's on the task list, they do something else. So that was a couple things mixed together. But that's how I would approach that.
Okay, good. And someone is asking, too, for some clarification, Joel, on, you're talking about this being proactive, but, there's also many people move from preventive to predictive. And can you just explain how you see the difference between what you're advocating in the proactive versus a predictive?
Yeah. Predictive maintenance is using technology to inspect assets. So you'll never have a different situation using preventive or predictive maintenance, because all that it's doing is looking at the asset, evaluating it for deterioration, and then looking at it a month later. With proactive, what we're doing is actually changing the way the asset deteriorates, or changing the way we take care of it. And it may involve doing more predictive maintenance or less predictive maintenance, depending on what the asset actually needs. So it's very confusing that we have all these P words, but preventive and predictive maintenance are related in that they're both inspection systems. And proactive maintenance is not related to that. It's related to changing the ground rules of the game so that the asset doesn't need as much maintenance.
Gotcha. You also mentioned you want to eliminate waste, and are there some areas where you would advocate not cutting back? You mentioned safety as being one, anything safety related. Are there others where you feel if you were to start experiments, that's not a place you'd experiment?
Well, you're not allowed to experiment with what are called mandatory PMs that are required by statute. Those are boiler inspections, crane inspections, things like that. So that's not an area that we get involved in at all. I encourage you to do the things that you're told to do. But almost every other place is fair game, considering that you'll never do anything that increases the risk or safety risk. Like, that would not be something that I would advocate. So mandatory PMs shouldn't be played with. Safety stuff shouldn't be played with. and pretty much everything else is fair game, but you've got to, do it intelligently.
Sure. How important is it that operations is involved in this program, or can it be handled just by the maintenance department?
There's elements of this that can be handled before we get operations involved. The idea that I'm saying is start doing it completely below the radar and get some successes under your belt. And then you want to bring operations in and engineering and purchasing and other groups. But first I would prove the concept of proactive maintenance in your environment and build some stories that you can tell. And I think that would be the best, best way to begin this.
Gotcha. Joe, when you mentioned about credibility, I think oftentimes it's that people use different terminology, and your idea of when a maintenance task is completed might be different from someone in production who might view it as, well, it's not back in service till it's at full capacity versus just you've handed it back to me. So
that's right.
Interesting viewpoint. All right. Well, are there any other questions for Joel? If you want to take a moment and type them in, and while we're doing that, I just want to thank Joel for putting this together for us today. And again, you can go to Joel's website to get a copy of the presentation. We will be drawing a name at random at the end upon completion of the survey of someone to get a signed copy of Joel's book. And if there are no more questions, again, thank you to Joel, and thank you to all our listeners today, and hope we'll do this again. And please feel free to give us your feedback on the survey, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again, everybody. Have a good day.